One Georgia quarterback who's a lot more calm this week, knowing he's got the job, Carson Beck. Kirby Smart nonchalantly announced that he is QB1, and the experience, the amount of time he's been in Athens was the defining factor over Brock Vandagriff and Gunnar Stockton.
Too bad Matthew C. has dropped us like a bad habit, or he would be in the comments right now talking about how Carson Beck looks like Napoleon Dynamite. Listen.
Fair take.
We saw it coming. We all saw it coming. Carson Beck and his light bulb shaped noggin. He won the starting job. And listen, I remember all the way back to Jim Chaney knowing exactly how many snaps Jake Fromm had taken coming into the 2018 season, to know that Jim Chaney, what I knew of him, he didn't look that up. That was a Kirby Smart stat. That was a Kirby Smart metric. He had mentioned it in a staff meeting or something. I felt it in my bones. And I just knew that Carson, having taken the amount of snaps that he had taken, was probably going to win this starting job. Not only that, guys, he won it. I mean, he really did. I mean, that G-Day performance was really good. It wasn't like Brock Vandagriff or Gunnar Stockton gave him a ton of competition that day. But, Carson Beck looked really good that day. He was efficient. I think he was 3 for 3 in the first half with touchdown drives against a dinged up but still really good Georgia defense. Got off to a slow start when they were in just kind of spider pads and helmets here for preseason practice. But once they put the pads on, man, he started stacking good practice on top of good practice. And here we are. Carson Beck's the starter, surprising absolutely no one. And, we've written a lot about it. We've written the timeline. We've written, I wrote a column that, kind of came to me whenever we were discussing some stuff on the message board, and maybe we'll get to it later. But the gist of it was Stetson Bennett didn't get a lot of your grace and your patience, Georgia fans. Maybe Carson Beck will.
Jake, you say it didn't surprise anyone. Did it surprise you that Kirby came out and announced it? Because I think that did surprise a lot of people on the message boards, at least.
Yeah, I kind of thought that he would just, in a way, leave it out there in the ether, just kind of, all right, yeah, this is, everybody knows, but I'm not going to say it.
I will say, though, you probably didn't anticipate, I don't think I anticipated him going into the season with an or on the depth chart when it was released.
Not necessary. You're right. Yeah. I mean, when we did that because we always do a pregame depth chart, like when we see that flip card, we do a pregame. I didn't expect an or there. Yeah. So maybe then at the latest, I don't know. You don't really know. He's handled it so many different ways. I mean, he named Jacob Eason the starter, but then I don't think he ever really named Jake Fromm the starter over Justin Fields. But then he named JT Daniels the starter. He never named Juwan Mathis the starter. So, I mean, it's just, there's so many different ways he's handled it. And I don't know, man, he's kind of earned the benefit of the doubt at this point, but it doesn't blow me away, like shock me that he announced it yesterday. But I didn't really expect it. I didn't expect the timing of it, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't expect it either, but when you see the impact it could have on the team, it removes all doubt, and they probably had a good sense of it, and maybe Carson Beck did too. But at least now, this week, they're going to start preparing for UT Martin. You know who your squad is. You know who the top dog is there in that position.
And I'll say this. I talked to a lot of player parents. I wouldn't say a lot. I mean, a lot's relative. I mean, several player parents. They'll tell you right now that Kirby Smart, if there's one truism from Kirby, it is that the team feels good about all three quarterbacks. It is, because I've heard parents be like, hey, man, listen, they'll rally behind Brock. Brock Vandagriff is a linebacker in a quarterback's body, or a linebacker mentality and with an arm. Gunnar Stockton is a guy that has the team's respect. They love the way he goes about his business. Kirby, that is an absolute truism from Kirby Smart, is that all the quarterbacks have his respect.
Yeah, but
the team's respect. Sorry,
but if you got three, you don't have one, right? I mean, that's the old adage, and so I feel like Georgia feels like they have one, whereas yeah, if you need to turn to another guy, that's fine. But is there one clear cut and head and shoulders above everybody? That certainly seems to be the case with this announcement, at least in my mind. And I'll say somebody on our board mentioned that I think it was Roddy and Dane were saying stuff about they were kind of surprised by this, that, you know, people didn't know this about Carson coming in. And a few people said, I can't remember people saying that. I'll say this. I'm surprised a little bit by it. I don't know that I thought Carson was the guy when he was coming into Georgia. I really didn't, to be honest with you. He had the potential and, you know, certainly had some things on his resume that would have pointed it that way. I saw him at the Elite 11 that year. Wasn't particularly blown away with that showing. Didn't feel like he was one of those guys that maybe, and you know, this was like coming right off of the Fromm or like right in the middle of Fromm. Fromm had such a magnetism about him that just drew people in, and he was able to lead that way. I didn't see that from Carson in those settings as well. But you know, it looks like he's trusted the process, to steal a phrase, and stuck with it. And now it's paying off for him in a big way. And I'm quite excited to see what he can do because, like I said, when he came in, I don't know that I would have guessed that he would have been in this position one day. But now that he is, I think that it's very intriguing because there's two pretty talented guys behind him as well.
Well, how about the fact that he stuck around a couple years ago? You thought he might have that opportunity when JT Daniels was hurt off the Clemson game to play against UAB, and something happened, and that something was Stetson Bennett, and he never really looked back.
Who?
But Carson Beck had a shot there, and, you know, I don't know what happened. Maybe y'all do. Maybe you can fill us in. But he didn't get the opportunity that day or that season or even the next season to be the guy, but he's still here.
I have heard all sorts of stories on that, by the way.
What a week that was. So, Roos, you may remember this. They had the COVID scare where Kirby kind of mentioned COVID and that they were at their highest number. And that was my first week on the job. Quarterback conversation. JT, is he playing? Is he not? Who's going to be the starter? Somebody ran a story that essentially said, you know, Carson Beck expects to start, but JT Daniels.
Oh yeah, I know who that story.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say a name, but yeah, I mean, what a week that was.
Hey, I was listen, man. Come Thursday, I was in the Golden State, getting ready for a wedding, taking some time off during the season. Yeah. You know, it was my buddy Nate Leckahall was getting married, and it was one of the greatest weekends of my entire life. It was incredible, great time. But I didn't have to deal with all that, thank goodness. But I will say this: I've heard so many different variations of the story. Carson struggled that week, but I don't know in hindsight that, struggle or not, he would have been the starting quarterback that day. Again, you know, go back to that number of snaps and experience. Stetson had started several games there before. You know, did Stetson Bennett have a tattoo? Do we know about Stetson Bennett's tattoo game?
None visible.
None visible.
Okay. I would assume so. I cannot verify.
Yeah. Man, Carson Beck here, man. Look at that. I mean, just tatted up big time.
Got the tiger on the arm there.
Giving the middle finger to the haters.
That doesn't even compare to the leg sleeve he's got.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, let me see if I can.
Different cat, man. Different cat.
He's got two kind of leg sleeves. He wears an actual sleeve on one.
That's looking like Iverson's. That's looking like Iverson's leg over there, man. I mean, come on.
Yeah, he's yeah, man. Good for him, dude. You know, express yourself in the ink, and you know, maybe there's no magnets under the field. But ultimately, you know, I don't know that he could have won that job or would have been the guy going into the UAB game. But I will say this: he did struggle that week, and Stetson Bennett went through 5 touchdowns. So, you know, Georgia definitely made the right decision that day and for the long haul. And, man, I tell you what, it's just Georgia quarterbacks. You know, Stetson kind of gave us all a break last year with the way he played and the way he got off to a start. He almost didn't give me a break because I've still got to eat my hat for him getting invited to New York for the Heisman. But Stetson kind of gave us a break, but man, it was such a weird few years there between, you know, Jake Fromm and Justin Fields. And, 2020, the cluster that was, and then, the semi cluster that 2021 was. And, Todd Monken, now beloved, figure in Georgia circles, basically being called an idiot in December for standing behind Stetson. It was, man, it was wild. But here we are again, and hopefully, Carson Beck will also continue to kind of give us a break now.
Yeah, I mean, the dialogue around quarterbacks for Kirby Smart has really come full circle, and winning a couple national championships absolutely justified whatever kind of problems he had with Justin Fields and Jake Fromm, and that's a debate for another day and, quite frankly, another show, because I think we've all spent enough words and ink on it. But whatever happens now, it's not Stetson Bennett's job. You're charting a new course with Carson Beck, and we've also seen this quarterback position flip-flop a couple times in Kirby Smart's career, with Jacob Eason coming in for Grayson Lambert, and then Jake Fromm coming in for Jacob Eason. So, and then everything you just said about 2020.
I guess Stetson and JC Daniels too.
Get
healthy.
Just because you think you got a QB1 right now doesn't mean this roller coaster has reached its final destination.
I mean, what, 4 of the 7 years that Kirby's been at the helm, they haven't finished with the same quarterback that started game 1?
Yeah.
Because, like you said, Lambert, Eason, Dwan Mathis in 2020, and then JT in 21.
True.
Well, Palmer, you were in the room. It's funny when you go back and listen to the press conference. As soon as Kirby makes the proclamation, everybody is typing away. It was one of those days. It's kind of you go into it thinking it's a ho-hum Saturday, but Kirby drops an Oppenheimer on us. So when you hear that Carson's going to be the guy, and you've seen him in his moments when he's been able to come in mop-up duty, who do you think is going to make the biggest impact behind Carson Beck? Do you think that Brock and Gunner will compete clearly for a clear-cut number 2 here, or do you think that's pretty much the pecking order is Brock and then Gunner?
I think that there will be a competition. Kirby talked about it, and we were discussing it after the fact. First of all, shout out to Jordan Hill. We were discussing beforehand the fact that, hey, what kind of pre-writes do y'all have? And jokingly, somebody mentioned, do you have a Carson Beck, announced as the starting quarterback pre-write? And, he did have it. And Connor Riley and I kind of were like, man, we should probably get something ready just in case. So glad that we ended up having something ready there. But, after the fact, we were discussing as well that every time Kirby talked about Carson, he very quickly also brought up Brock and Gunner. And I think that goes back to what Jake said earlier about they feel really confident in all 3 of these quarterbacks. They could win a lot of games this season with any of them. I do think that Gunner is going to give Brock, a push for that playing time. And I think it will be very beneficial for both of those guys to get playing time, because ultimately you're looking at 2 guys that have appeared in 5 games for Brock, completing 0 of his 3 passing attempts, and no games played for Gunner Stockton. So I think, when Kirby says that the biggest separator was the experience, it's easy to see why. Carson played, 15 plus snaps in I think it was 4 or 5 games last year, 7 total games. He's appeared in 12 over 3 years. He's been in this system. He's had, very impressive G-Day performances, averaging over 240 in each of those. And obviously that's a, air show, but those guys don't have the experience. Kirby and this staff wants to get them the experience so that if and when their time comes, they'll be ready. Because like we just said, we never know how the quarterback situation is going to play out at Georgia. And there's a chance that Georgia needs either of those quarterbacks to win games this fall.
Do you expect that Gunner will have similar numbers as Brock, or do you think he might get in a little bit more with the schedule?
I would say both of those guys probably get in 5 to 7 games this year.
That seems fair to me.
I mean, because they've already both redshirted, so you don't have to sit back and hold them to the less than 4 or less. So I think that both those guys will see significant playing time. I think that it's not all too crazy to think that we might see, 3 quarterbacks in the first half against UT Martin. I definitely think that we're going to see
3
multiple
in the first half. All right.
I think that we're going to see multiple in the first half, and it would not surprise me if all 3 of them
shaking things up tonight. I like it.
I just think that they understand the value in getting those reps and getting those reps with good players. I mean, there's a reason that Gunnar Stockton has gotten reps with the 2s and the 3s. There's a reason that Brock Vandegrift has gotten reps with the 1s and the 2s. They want to bump those guys up and figure out what they've got, with some better players around them, a better offensive line that can protect them, a better, group of receivers that's, better at hauling in the ball, and also going up against a better defense. So I think that you figure out more about those guys when they're playing with better talent around them, as opposed to, your 3rd string offensive line working with your 3rd string quarterback. I do think that we're going to see all 3 of those guys play. And I think that we're going to continue to see a competition and a battle for playing time with those 2 younger guys, Brock Vandegrift and Gunnar Stockton.
It's going to be fun to watch.
If Martin goes the way that I think it will, I would be very interested. I don't know that they'll do this or that it's in their game plan, but I'd be very interested for that second half if you started rotating series for these guys and give them a chance. Just each one, let's see how it kind of clicks along the way. Does it affect rhythm if you take them out? Like I said, I don't know that that'll happen, but I'd be interested to see that. And I think that that's a team that you're going to have a chance to do something like that against.
I would prefer that it be 2 and 2, because I think that gets a better, let those guys get their feet wet a little bit and get in a rhythm. Because I mean, thinking back to that UAB game that we talked about, I believe it was 2 series for Stetson, 1 for Carson, and it was 2 touchdowns and then a 3 and out. And then they went right back to Stetson. You never really know what Carson could have done had they, given him another drive to get comfortable. I mean, it's hard when you get thrown in there, especially coming off the bench, to be comfortable right away. And so, maybe that first drive wasn't an accurate representation, and, who knows how a second drive for him would have gone. That's why I think that if you are going to end up with some sort of drive count rotation, I think you got to give all these guys multiple drives to work with talent around them.
One of the things I do think kind of hurts Georgia's ability to get all 3 guys ample amount of playing time is the fact that, number one, doesn't have a lot of snaps under his belt either. And I think that they're probably going to want to try and get him as many as they can before South Carolina and before Auburn. So that one's a little bit tough, man. That one is a little bit tough. And another thing too, if they come out and they have a who was it last year? Samford. Where did they win that game? 33-0 or something like that.
It was a lot lighter than what people thought.
Yeah, it was. I mean, they dominated the game. There was never any concern or any weirdness or anything like that. But they just didn't. They didn't run away with it. They didn't play very, very well in the red zone. So if you come out against UT Martin and you're not able to punch in touchdowns, let's say you score on your first 5 drives and you only score 1 touchdown. That kind of throws a wrench in those plans. But again, it might not be the worst thing ever. That right there might force, Carson Beck to get a full, 3/4 of that game and allow him to grow a little bit. It's just such an odd dynamic when you're playing an inexperienced guy over a couple of other inexperienced guys. But this is the first time. This is the first time under Kirby Smart, once he got past, Jake Fromm, that he didn't really kind of bring in a transfer quarterback and for an inexperienced guy. I mean, they brought in 2 right there, after the 2019 season and with Jamie Newman and JT Daniels. And this time they're just kind of relying on depth, just kind of relying on the guys that are already there and the guys that they developed. And, you hope all those practice reps that Carson Beck has gotten against a very good defense, serve as enough preparation.
And that's not, I'm not saying they're doing it for this reason, but I do think it's a good byproduct. If you're looking at Ryan Puglisi and Dylan Raiola and you're seeing how Georgia's handling this year. And like you said, you could probably go out and find a transfer quarterback who would come into a team like the defending national champions back to back, right? But, you get two of these guys in and you say, hey, look, if you stick with us, if you do what we say and you follow along, I'm not under any, false pretense that Raiola is going to hang around if he's riding the bench into year 3 or anything like that.
I'd put those odds at 0.
Yeah, or 2 even, really.
4.
4, sorry. It might be tough to get him to hang past 2 realistically, but I think it does speak well to those guys. Like I said, I don't think that that's a reason they're doing it, but I think that Georgia's showing, hey, look, we trust our evals, we got our guys, and we're riding with them, in the time that matters.
Here's what Kirby Smart needs to do. And if he's not watching, I hope someone will pass this along. Carson Beck's never started on the road in an SEC hostile environment. I think you got to ask the Sanford Stadium home fans to just play along and treat it like Carson Beck is a visiting quarterback and just make life hell for him. Pump up the noise. Don't tell the crowd to be quiet. Offense is at work. Make him feel it. Get in his ear hole, because there's really been no way to practice that or simulate that. That's just free advice. Galaxy brain idea that no one's really thinking about, but I think it could help your team in the long run.
If they show up like they did against Tennessee last year, we'll be talking about a headline of Georgia loses to UT Martin 6-3.
I know. And that will help your team grow. So I'm
well, I mean, Wes, I don't want that. Like, for my job and my sanity and the dog walk message board community, we don't want
could
that.
Be good for business.
I will fake my own death.
Stranger things have happened.